WADR West Africa Democracy Radio.
WADR. WADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar. Good afternoon and many thanks for tuning into West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and all around the world on WADR.org. This is NEWSLINK. Here are the top stories. ECOWAS announces measures to restore constitutional order in Niger, imposes sanctions and travel bans. Senegalese opposition leader Ousmane Sonko appears before a court today as he faces 7 new charges. In Burkina Faso, judges indefinitely caught activities over alleged interference in the judicial procedure. And the Medical Association of Ghana raises concerns about a cancer epidemic in the country. Stay with us for details of these stories and more.
Here is James Ajapon with NEWSLINK.
Many thanks for joining us. Let's begin with the outcome of the extraordinary summit by the heads of state and government of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, on the socio-political situation in Niger. At the end of the meeting on Sunday, the leaders demanded the release and reinstatement of Mohamed Bazoum as the legitimate president, dismissing any claims of resignation. WADR's Usman Umar in Abuja tells us more about the summit and details of the communique issued by ECOWAS.
President Tinubu expressed gratitude to the fellow leaders, as well as the chairperson of the African Union Commission, the special representative of the United Nations Office in West Africa and the Sahel, and other key figures for responding to the urgent call for the summit.
The danger to us right now is the fact that one of us, His Excellency Mohamed Bazoum, is in hostage by his own army, the Presidential Guard. What a calamity. It's an assault on every one of us. And we must take a very strong action. We want to protect the life of Bazoum, President Bazoum. Disrupting the democratic order has left the people of Niger in a state of uncertainty and vulnerability.
In a communique released after the summit, expressing strong condemnation of the attempted coup and the subsequent illegal detention of President Bazoum, the ECOWAS leaders have declared the situation as a hostage crisis. They hold the individuals responsible for the coup fully accountable for President Bazoum's safety and the well-being of his family and government. To restore constitutional order in Niger, ECOWAS has issued a 1-week deadline for compliance with their demands. If the demands are not met, the leaders have pledged to take all necessary measures. This includes the closure of land and air borders between ECOWAS countries and Niger, the establishment of a no-fly zone for commercial flights to and from Niger, and the suspension of all commercial and financial transactions between ECOWAS member states and the coup state. Furthermore, the regional bloc will freeze assets of the Republic of Niger in the ECOWAS Central Bank, state enterprises, and parastatals held in commercial banks. In addition, travel bans and asset freezes have been imposed on military officials involved in the coup attempt, as well as their immediate family members and civilians collaborating with the illegitimate government. It will be recalled that groups such as the Economic Community Citizens had called against blanket economic sanctions, saying such sanctions hurt the innocent citizens more than the coup plotters or their immediate families. For NEWSLINK on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
Meanwhile, experts have reacted differently to the regional body's imposition of sanctions on Niger, which they say may only add to the problems already faced by the country. More so, the ordinary people, as in the case of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Guinea, will bear the brunt. An additional measure, which is the threat or their proposed military intervention, is seen by many as highly consequential, given the surge in terrorist-related crimes across the region. We are going to delve deep into that on our guest interview. Still in Niger, France has tightened the security of its embassy. This was announced by Kedose in an official statement late Sunday. In the statement, Paris condemned vehemently the violence in Niger by protesters and called for the respect of all diplomatic conventions, including the security of personnel, its foreign residents and lands. In addition, French diplomacy has shown its support to ECOWAS, sanctions for the restoration of constitutional order, and other economic and financial sanctions imposed on the country. As a reminder, in demand for the departure of French nationals in Niger, an earlier peaceful protest turned violent towards the diplomatic building of France in the early hours of Sunday. However, the Quai d'Orsay does not foresee at this stage the evacuation of its 500 to 600 nationals who are in Niger, but are observing caution and security measures to avoid any casualties.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. NEWSLINK continues.
Let's get back home in Senegal, where updates coming in is that opposition leader Ousmane Sonko is currently in court this morning after his arrest last Friday. Sonko faces 7 charges, including inciting insurrection and attack on state security, among others. But the politician, ahead of today's hearing, began a hunger strike on Sunday, according to his lawyers, who spoke of their client's persecution without any legal basis. More details with Abdullahi Hassan.
Ousmane Sonko's lawyers at a press conference repeatedly asserted that the charges against their client had no legal basis. Demba Siri Badley is one of Sonko's defenders.
We can't consider that I, the prosecutor, have Ousmane Sonko in my hands and that he remains in a situation of contumacy. If he doesn't acquiesce to the sentence and the judgment are annulled. As soon as he was arrested, Ousmane Sonko wrote a letter to the investigator to say that he was not acquiescing to the decision since he had been arrested, and from that moment he was discharged from the charges for which he was sentenced to 2 years for corrupting young people.
Yusufa Kamara, who is also Ousmane Sonko's lawyer, points out inaccuracies in the public prosecutor's statement. He speaks of an orchestrated order.
As you know, when an investigating judge's cabinet is opened, all the evidence is referred to the investigating judge, who must identify and arrest anyone he or she believes to have been involved in the offense. And if the examining judge discovers new fact in the course of his or her investigations, this means that all the investigations carried out and linked to this incident have no legal basis.
For the defenders of the declared 2024 presidential candidate, his arrest on Friday invalidates his conviction in absentia handed down last June, says Bamba Sise.
They are talking about a call for insurrection, whereas Ousmane Sonko has always called for resistance, which is a constitutional right. It's done on request, and the prosecutor says so in his statement, in agreement with the authorities. If the prosecutor goes ahead, he doesn't need the authorities' agreement. If the prosecutor prosecutes in the name of the Senegalese people and clearly says that I did it objectively, that means it is not objective.
Ousmane Sonko's French lawyer, Joan Branco, made a surprise appearance at the press conference. The state of Senegal had issued an international arrest warrant for him in mid-June.
Abdullahi Hassan reporting there. In Guinea, Captain Moussa Dadis Camara and Captain Marcel Guilavogui, both accused in the 28 September 2009 massacre trial, have been heard by the senior examining magistrate of the Kaloum Court of First Instance. Former junta leader Dadis Camara has filed a complaint against his former bodyguard Marcel Guilavogui, whom he accuses of defamation and blackmail in connection with the massacre. While Camara's lawyers intend to go all the way, Guilavogui's lawyers are denouncing a maneuver to intimidate their client, who accuses the former junta leader of being behind the massacre. In other news, in Burkina Faso, judges have commenced an indefinite strike to protest against the reported abduction in prison of a woman by a group of soldiers. In a statement by the Inter-Union of Magistrates over the weekend, the action also means the suspension of all activities in court. Oki Obiarika brings more details in this report.
The union explains that in recent times, the public was shocked by discovering through a video on social networks a scene of torture of a 50-year-old by individuals directed by a traditional healer. A police investigation would later lead to the arrest of 9 people and charged with acts of torture, intentional bodily harm, and kidnapping. Last Friday, when warrants of committal had just been issued against the defendant, the union said it noted the presence of a small group of hooded and armed soldiers on board 2 pickups around the courthouse of the Wadr 2 High Court. The detainee Nikema Amsetu was then handed over to Element, who claimed to be part of the National Intelligence Agency, ANR, without the agreement of the prosecutor. For his part, the Director General of the Prison Administration said he acted on instructions from the Burkinabe Minister in charge of Justice and Human Rights. Reacting to this development, spokesperson for the Burkinabe government, Jean-Emmanuel Wadr assured that all measures have been taken in handling the case with strict respect for the principles of the rule of law, social peace and security. The Inter-Union of Magistrates of Burkina Faso insists that all court activities remain suspended until the so-called traditional healer lady is returned to the Ouagadougou Correctional Facility.
Oge Obiarika reporting there. At least 47 Liberians have received scholarships for advanced, steady and short-term training in China through a human resource development agreement between Monrovia and Beijing. Since reaffirming its commitment to the One China policy in 2005, which was reiterated by President George Weah this year, Monrovia has enjoyed an increase in assistance from the Asian giants, especially in the areas of capacity building. WDR's Darlington Pokpa tells us more.
Of the 47 Liberians, 25 Liberian journalists were selected for short-term media training in China. The initiative is part of a China-Liberia bilateral partnership geared towards building the country's human resource development, according to an official at the Chinese embassy near Monrovia, Finyuri.
May you all return home, well-trained to serve the country and the people of Liberia, and become the builder of Liberia's development. At the same time, you are cultural envoys of Liberia. You are expected to make due contribution to enhancing the China-Liberia friendship.
A Liberian minister, Steve Trukompui, reaffirmed the government's commitment to respecting the bilateral relation with the People's Republic of China.
It is with great pride and joy that we witness this celebration. I remember like yesterday, 10 years ago, I was in those very seats.
Also speaking, IT and Education Minister Latin Daton appreciated China for always supporting Liberia in developing its human resource sector, calling on the beneficiaries to make the country prouder during their stay in one of Asia's giant nations and political powerhouse.
I've been coming to this program many years. Every time I come, I'm happy to celebrate with the incoming recipients because you are taking a journey, and that journey is not only for yourself, it's for your family, but most importantly, it's for your country.
The 22 scholarship students who are expected to depart Liberia this week will take up a mission at different universities across China, while the selected 25 Liberian journalists are expected to undergo short-term media training at the same venue. For NEWSLINK on West Africa Democracy Radio, I'm Darlington Pokpa in Monrovia.
You are listening to NEWSLINK on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM, Dakar, Senegal. Here is a reminder of our top stories. ECOWAS announces measures to restore constitutional order in Niger, imposes sanctions and travel bans. Senegalese opposition leader Ousmane Sonko appears before a court today as he faces 7 new charges. In Burkina Faso, judges indefinitely court activities over alleged interference in the judicial procedure. And the Medical Association of Ghana raises concerns about the cancer epidemic in the country. Still ahead, we have our newspaper review, guest interview, and some sports update. Kindly stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio.
It's 30 minutes past 12 in our studios here. This is West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM. Do join our conversations on Twitter and now X, on Instagram @WADR News, and on Facebook, West Africa Democracy Radio English Service. Find us on YouTube at WADR News. Ghana is on the verge of a cancer epidemic as the country records 40,000 cancer cases and 15,000 deaths every year. Out of the global cancer deaths worldwide, 70% are in low and middle income countries, of which Ghana is part of, according to the nation's medical association. The disparity is even more striking in the case of cervical cancer, where 90% of new cases and deaths from this preventable disease occur in low and middle income countries. From Accra, Atiawene Bella Lawson reports.
Per the statistics, at least 41 Ghanaians die every day due to cancer-related conditions in Ghana. Speaking at the 27th Annual Ghana Medical Association Public Lecture, Professor Benedict Calistego, an Associate Professor of Epidemiology and Public Health at the Department of Community Health at the University of Ghana, details the leading types of cancers in Ghana.
Breast cancer tops the list. For every 100,000 Ghanaians, about 66 of them would have breast cancer. If you work with 31 million, you are talking about over 20,000 breast cancer cases. Then it is followed by cervical cancer, which doesn't appear at the global level because it's a preventable disease. But we are still battling with it. And it's number 2. Then prostate cancer, followed by cancer of the ovary, and then that of the liver.
On his part, Dr. Frank Serbo, the president of the Ghana Medical Association, described the happening as a pandemic and called for improved financial commitment to fight the menace.
There are still a lot more people who are dying from cancers or who are getting cancers who are not being captured within the formal system. And so the numbers are more than that. And this is a disease that when you get, your chance of survival is even very low. And so there is no question about the fact that we are having an epidemic, and clearly we need to do something about it.
Cancer is a leading cause of death worldwide, accounting for nearly 10 million deaths in 2020, or nearly 1 in 6 deaths. Reporting for NewsLink for West Africa Democracy Radio, I am Atiawene Imbila Lawson in Accra.
This is the newspaper review. Stay on top of the news. Get the most important stories with added insight and concise review.
This is the newspaper review.
Up next, we have our press stories from Abuja with WADR Usman Umar.
Hello and welcome to the press review segment. Now, as you would expect, most of the national dailies are all leading with the story on the coup situation in Niger. Daily Trust, in fact, has this banner headline saying, "Coupists seek Russia's help as ECOWAS mulls military action," with riders clash imminent as regional body orders border closure no-fly zone. US considers cutting off ties. But the story we'll be zooming in on today largely is from The Guardian newspaper, which has its banner headline saying, "Economy, rule of law, foreign policy, security, top agenda for nominees." Now, top of the agenda for the government of President Tinubu, when fully formed, one of the issues has to do with addressing insecurity challenges, as you would expect, the challenges of insecurity in the northeast, which has to do with the issue of the insurgency in the name of Boko Haram, ISWAP, and ISIS, and then, of course, issue of kidnapping for ransom in the northwestern region. And then there is also the issue of economic revamp and poverty reduction. As you already know, poverty is on the high in Nigeria. The economy is sleeping, so to speak, because after fuel subsidy, in fact, even before subsidy removal, the country was in a lull. And then added to the harsh reality that accompanied the removal of fuel subsidy. So top on the issue for the government would be policies that will be focused on economic revamp and poverty reduction. And ultimately, there is also the issue of respect for rule of law. The perception of respect for rule of law, especially at the federal government level in Nigeria, over the years has been very, very low. So expectations are high that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, based on the promises that he made on 29th of May when he was sworn in, would adhere strictly to the rule of law. These are some of the expectations that the Guardian newspaper, in this report is saying that people, that is the country, is expecting from the Tinubu administration. And this is the much we have for you today on the press review segment with me, Usman Umar. It's back to you.
Thank you, Usman, for that newspaper review.
Politics,
Analysis on major news,
social matters, and all. This is The Guest.
The guest interview is a special focus on key decisions by the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, at the end of the July 31st summit in Abuja. Like other cool states, namely Mali, Burkina Faso, and Guinea, Niger was hit with financial and economic sanctions as well as travel bans on the Mauritanians and family members. While all borders between Niger and neighboring countries remain closed, the sub-regional body says the coup leaders have 7 days to restore and reinstate constitutional order. Since the coup last week, which the international community, such as the AU, EU, UN, and the United States have condemned, former colonial power France is the most outspoken and warns against any attack on the structures in the Niger. But Nigerians, in solidarity with the junta, are asking France to immediately evacuate their land. Morgan Asogba, a regional governance expert, underscores the impact of some of the measures by ECOWAS and more.
I do hope that the leaders of ECOWAS as well as the experts have taken into consideration all the possible consequences of such a step in terms of security of the West African region, in terms of impact on the people, especially the view of the people that they are supposed to serve, and also in terms of feasibility. What are the strategic aspects that will lead into the implementation of such a force? Would that just be like ECOMOG that was we don't want to say thoroughly led by Nigeria? These are many questions that the leaders and the experts should have attempted to answer before taking such a step. But when you look at it and you try to answer to those questions, it will be difficult to say that this is the best option looking at the current security situation of the region and looking at the view of the people in general. And there could be more liability linked to it than benefit in terms of constructing an effective integration process in the West African region.
What other way would you suggest as a regional expert, who understands very well the issues bedeviling in the sub-region, as a better method or measure in not just addressing the issue in Niger, but ending the chain or the pandemic of coup across the sub-region?
I believe one of the first things to do is to accept the fact we are having a paradigm shift in terms of leadership. If we do have coup, as it is coming these days in West Africa, it's simply because there should be a very specific problem in the leadership. Coups are usually staged because of two main reasons. Either there is a huge gap between the aspiration of the people and the aspiration of the leaders, or there is a huge gap between the aspiration of the leaders and the aspiration of the armed forces. It is important for an effective leadership to find a way to harmonize the aspiration of all the key components of a state, the people, the armed forces, in terms of development. So the advice will be to accept the situation and then to find out a way to monitor the transition of the states that are currently led by military forces and to maintain the integration process of ECOWAS that has gone too far.
France, the former colonial power, the colonizer of Francophone West Africa, remains almost the most angry and agitated country in the West since the coup in Niger. Can you possibly say why this is so?
It is obvious that the interests of France are highly threatened because Niger appeared to be one of the last serious interests of France in West Africa, because Burkina Faso, Mali are two strong ones that had just left and destroy in a certain way the interests, be it strategic, military, economic, of France. But Niger was the last stand, and it is obvious that we have interests in the economic environment, we have interest in the strategy in terms of military bases. So France is having such attitude because definitely there are many interests of France that are being threatened.
That was Morgana Soba, a regional governance expert. And here is Sankule Janko with some sports updates.
Hello there, warm welcome and thank you for joining us. Morocco registered their first ever victory in the FIFA Women's World Cup following their 1-0 win against Korea Republic on Sunday. Morocco is the second African team to win a match in the ongoing FIFA Women's World Cup following Nigeria's dramatic 3-2 win against co-host Australia on Thursday. The North African team bounced back from their humiliating defeat to Germany in their opener and will hope to build this victory ahead of their final group game against Colombia. The Atlas Lionesses went into the game as heavy underdogs against South Korea, who were ranked 50 places higher than the African side in the world rankings. But they pulled one of the biggest surprises of the Women's World Cup as they beat their much fancied opponents. And Super Eagles forward Chidera Ejike has joined Belgian League champions Royal Antwerp on a one-year deal from CSK Moscow, according to Soccernet. Ejike spent last season on loan at Hertha Berlin, but could not help them stay in the Bundesliga following their relegation to German Bundesliga 2. The Super Eagles forward reportedly used an exception from FIFA for players active in Russia to make the switch to Belgium. And that's it for sports. It's back to you.
Thank you, Sankule, for that sports update. We have come to the end of this edition of NEWSLINK from West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening. And many thanks to our listeners in the Gambia via Hot 104.3 FM, New Me FM 94.0, and Radio Vetas 102.9 Banjul in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM Lofa County. We also thank our listeners in Ghana on Radio Pad 95.1 Savannah region, and on Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi. Christian Mukidi has been on the console. Many thanks to Mustafa Sek for our Facebook Live coverage. Do interact with us via social media platforms on Twitter, now X, Instagram at the BADR News, and on Facebook, West Africa Democracy Radio English Service. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is a rebroadcast of our health program, Well Body with Imo Edit. I am James Ejapon. Good afternoon.
Talk, music, get it all 24 hours on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM.